Good morning, Wabash. Speaking today in chapel is Dr. Thomas Bambrey. Dr. Bambrey started his journey with Wabash in the fall of 1964 and then graduated in the spring of 1968. He returned to Wabash in 1997 and has served as many roles for the college, including professor, dean of students, and athletic director. Today he returns to share his thoughts in his talk titled, Wabash in My Rearview Mirror. Please welcome Dr. Tom Bambrey.
Good morning, Wabash. Sphinx Club, thanks again. Ian and I were talking, and over the last week or so I've been trying to count. This is either my 13th or 14th chapel talk since I returned to the college in 1997. That's probably too many, but here I am anyway. You know, so far this semester, chapel talks have included a healthy dose of Wabash history, including Rick Warner's tribute to former professor of religion and respected theologian Bill Plaker, who was class of 1970. We were in school here together for a couple of years. Steve Hoffman's talk on some of his experiences here, and Hoffman graduated in the mid-'80s, so jumping forward a little bit. And then, of course, the remarkable Jean Williams on her many decades of life on and around the campus. There's more than a whiff of nostalgia and affection in those talks. I want today to continue in that vein, evoking Wabash history from a personal perspective. Like Warner, Hoffman, and Williams, I look at the past through a rearview mirror, through a personal one. Wabash receding into legend, but with, I hope, some meaning for the present moment. I first stepped onto the Wabash College campus exactly 50 years ago. Exactly. I first saw Wabash through the windshield of a car bringing me from a small town in western Pennsylvania to Honors Scholarship Weekend. Exactly 50 years ago. My visit to campus would be the only time I came here prior to my arrival as a freshman in September of 1964. As a student in the largest class ever to enter the college up to that time. It was the 60s, with all the baggage that decade still has with it. I was here from 1964 to 1968. When I graduated, the country was going through a period of turmoil. Times they are a-changing, sang Bob Dylan. John Kennedy was dead. Assassinated on November 22nd, 1963, when I was a senior in high school. Civil rights, driven by the personal bravery and intellectual brilliance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his supporters, was the central social and moral issue of the day. The Vietnam War was heating up, heading towards a tragic conclusion, towards protests, and draft decisions, domestic violence, campus turmoil. Women's liberation was bubbling to the surface. During the winter and spring of 1968, my senior year, the North Vietnamese launched its Tet Offensive in Vietnam, and that offensive in its aftermath contributed to the tens of thousands of deaths of U.S. military personnel that the Vietnam War would leave as its sad legacy. In early April of that year, Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered by a lone gunman. In early June, just after my graduation, Robert Kennedy was shot and killed during a presidential candidate visit to Los Angeles. Todd Gitlin, himself a radical anti-war activist and one of the founders of SDS, the Students for Democratic Society, later a professor of sociology, referred to that time as years of hope, days of rage. Here at Wabash, students found a relative isolation from many of the events that roiled the country and the world. But times here were changing as well. The college's enrollment increased to nearly its present size. And in my sophomore year, 65-66, the Monon Bell returned to campus for the first time since 1955. 10 years without the bell. 8 losses and 2 ties. And if there was a tie, the team with the bell kept it. And it finally came back. Can you imagine, those of you students sitting here today, what it would be like if you'd never had the bell? Never in your student experience. You've always had it. Of course, 65 was the year of the Great Bell Heist, popularly known as the Mexican Heist or Operation Frijoles. When Wabash students posing as officials from Mexico looking for scholarships for worthy Mexican students conned the DPU administration into revealing the hidden location of the bell. They were hiding it. They were putting it away because they were afraid. Well, they were afraid. And then the students removed, we always thought liberated, the bell from a maintenance building near Blackstock Stadium. Sherry Ross said I could use this. I gave it to her a number of years ago. That's an original poster. It appeared on the DePauw campus the day following the bell heist. I don't know if you all can read it. It says, "Congratulations to President Kerstetter," he was the DePauw president, "and his Dannies for 1, winning the Nobel Prize, and 2, granting $20,000 in scholarships to needy Wabash students." That's an original. A friend of mine sent it to me. Found it under his mother's bed after her death. How it got there, he didn't remember. The Bachelor editor wrote the following week after the theft, the quote, "The last time I heard a story to rival the Monon Bell incident, Hansel and Gretel had just pushed the witch into the oven." It was bigger than that. By the way, the bell was returned to the Dannies before the game, but Wabash won it back 16-6. And students in, well, some of them, in sombreros and serapes danced onto the field in celebration. You gotta love that. I mean, it's just... Senior comprehensive examinations were later in my student days. We sat for comps my senior year on April 15th and 16th. Orals followed a few weeks later. Finals were in late May, and graduation was the first weekend in June. Comps were 12 hours of written classroom writing. Your rear end in a seat in a classroom. Morning and afternoon sessions, 2 consecutive days. 4 sessions of 3 hours each. Recently, with the help of the college's excellent archivists, I was able to read my comps essay questions from 1968. No surprise that I was well prepared for graduate school. Day 1, first morning. We all wrote what we called, and I suppose the faculty called it too, the big essay. Here's the assignment for English majors for that morning. Spend the entire 3 hours on the following. Whether he takes pains to make it clear or allows all kinds of subterfuge to hide it, any serious artist spends a good part of his time developing or supporting a theory of right conduct. Sounds like the gentleman's rule. Defend or refute this statement using examples from Shakespeare and from works, poems, novels, plays, essays, of representative authors in each of 3 of the following categories. And they had a list of literary periods, and one of the ones you had to use was the 20th century, but you chose others as well. 3 hours, 1 essay. We also wrote for 3 hours on our minor. Mine was psychology. For 3 more hours on what was termed crossover assignments, taking into account the relationships between major and minor. and a final 3 hours on specific major elements.
In
My year, they gave us 40 terms, character names, etc. We had to write on 30, and then a bunch of quotes. Shorter essays. Writer's cramp. As I said, I was English psych, and here's one of my crossover questions, the crossover between English and psychology. Compare and contrast methods used by psychologists on the one hand and by literary critics on the other to discover what a word or verbal unit means. I suppose I did it then. I passed, but I don't know if I could do that now. There were no immediate retakes. Flunking comps, any part of comps, meant a student did not graduate with his class. Stakes were high. Anyway, in early June 1968, the day after commencement, I drove away. Wabash in my rearview mirror to an uncertain future. Over the next 3 decades, I came back occasionally to a class reunion, homecoming, or bell game. And in 1993, I accepted a position at St. Lawrence University in far upstate New York. On my way there from Denver, Colorado, where I had spent 22 years, first as a graduate student, then as a teacher and administrator at the University of Denver, I stopped at Wabash. Some weeks later, I submitted an article to Alumni Notes in the Wabash magazine. Here's what I wrote and what the magazine printed in its next issue. Sunday, June 20th, 1993, dear alma mater. 7 miles north of Atlantic, Iowa, I drive onto I-80, headed toward the rising sun. Early the previous day, I watched the Rocky Mountains in my rearview mirror as I left Denver after 22 years on my way to my new job as Dean of Student Life and Co-Curricular Education at St. Lawrence University in Canton, New York. Saturday night, I had slept at my wife's parents' home in Atlantic, Iowa, 625 miles east of Denver. Now I am on the road again, driving through the hills of western Iowa. Past Des Moines, I detour into Grinnell to see the college there. Red brick buildings with white wood trim, green lawns, canopy of trees, typically Midwestern small college. Maybe that is where the idea first began to form. At noon, I crossed the Mississippi at Davenport. A few miles into Illinois, the road forks. I-80 running due east toward Chicago, and I-74 angling south. At the last moment, I decide, to hell with expediency, I begin a pilgrimage. Dear alma mater, at thy shrine. Turning onto I-74, I go the way I must go, back into my own history with the certainty that I need to spend this night in Crawfordsville at Wabash. Illinois passes in the rain. Galesburg, Peoria, Bloomington, Champaign-Urbana, and then Danville on the border. I drive into Indiana and race the few remaining miles. Off I-74, I pass the Holiday Inn, cross Sugar Creek, and head for the only place I know will be perfect. 5 minutes later, I'm checked into the Lew Wallace. The Lew. It was still semi-respectable. Stopping at my room, only long enough to change into running gear, I then jogged through the parking lot, my property of Wabash Athletic Department t-shirt from previous visits announcing my affiliation, cross Wabash Avenue, and run onto campus. Once, twice, I go around the circle, passing the Lilly Library, its new facade unfamiliar. The chapel, Center Hall, bearing toward hallowed ground, I cut between Baxter and the chapel. The stadium on my right, Wabash always fights. Go behind Martindale and find the old cross-country course. In the cool green dusk of the Arboretum, running with vivid recollection, I hear generations breathing Wabash on my mind. here on these grounds, in the classrooms nearby, on the old cinder track, Owen Huntsman watching, I passed into manhood, 1964, 1968. Here I fell in love with books, ideas, with friends with this small college. After one circuit beneath the trees, I enter the main campus once more. 25 years after leaving, I am back again, haunted by twilight ghosts of those teachers who mattered and whom I never told. Walt Fertig, Dick Strawn, Hall Peebles, Owen Dustin, Jack Charles, many others. I sense, too, my old student companions in this place where during the best of times friendship had its home and happiness its headquarters. I had returned before, but never alone like this. Never to the campus empty and silent and readily accepting my nostalgia. I recall, or perhaps now think for the first time, how Wabash exists permanently yet embraces each new class, and how freshness and permanence combine in her. Such warmth of feeling and depth of emotion this evening, and the knowledge that I am received again, and that time has not faded her scarlet, nor tarnished the deepest memories of her. I jog back to the loo, read briefly, turn off the light, and sleep soundly. Monday, June 21st. I awake from a vivid dream of my arrival at Wabash. Early September 1964. I come from a small town in western Pennsylvania. My father leaving me to return home, and I, unaware of meaning at this young age, turning away without waving goodbye. And then thoughts just after awakening of my life, my lucky escape from the Vietnam draft. 3 years of high school teaching, a PhD in literature, college teaching and administration. My children, my wife Rosalie. I think about how Wabash prepared me, shaped me, or better, allowed me to shape myself, and instilled in me commitments to free thought, to education, and to the life of the mind. I shave and dress quickly, eat breakfast at the Waffle House, wishing I was at the Snacker. The old-timers know about that. Checking out of the loo, I am almost ready to go. But first I drive to the campus center, now the Spark Center. At the bottom of the stairs on the side of the building, I walk through the doors and stare into the Scarlet Inn. Empty, dark. By my watch, it is 8:10. On the door of the bookstore, a sign says, "Open 9 to 5, Monday to Friday." But the lights are on, and the door swings slowly open at my push. I call out, "Are you here?" From behind a bookshelf, she answers, "We're closed. I'm doing inventory. Here early today, finishing up." I can't wait. The road to New York is long. "I'm an alumnus, class of 68, I explain. I'm passing through, made a special point to stop hundreds of miles out of my way. Do you mind if I come in? I'd like to buy something to remember the visit." She understands. Perhaps she's merely nice to everyone. Perhaps my tone senses the urgency. "Come on in, look around." "Did you say class of 68? 25 years, that's getting to be a long time." While she continues her work, I walk directly to what I seek. A heavy gray sweatshirt, block red Wabash on the chest, simple and perfect. I still have it. As I pay her for the purchase, we chat briefly, then she kindly sends me off, both of us smiling. Me at my good fortune so early this morning. Her at my satisfaction and perhaps at having pleased me. I didn't ask her name, but she is one more reason why Wabash burns brightly for me. I climb into my car, toss the bookstore bag among my boxes and luggage in the rear, and drive slowly through the red brick portals. And I mean those portals. There was a road directly in front of the athletic center. You could come off the street down there, drive past the athletic center between the Armory and Walcott, and right up onto campus. So I climb into my car, toss the bookstore bag among my boxes and luggage in the rear, and drive slowly toward the red brick portals. To my left, high above the glass door into Chadwick Court, I see the Monon Bell. I brake, grin, and give the bell a thumbs up. I know, of course, what its presence on campus means. One more hard-fought victory. One more year of Wabash domination. Leaving, I turn from Crawford onto Wabash Avenue and drive slowly through town. Beyond Smartsburg, I pull onto I-74, heading for Naptown, going east and once again away. Over 50 years of association, my relationship with Wabash has changed, as it should. And Wabash has changed. There are those who don't like that. There are those who wish it were the same as it was 50 years ago. But stasis, while it might be comfortable, is dangerous. Most importantly, from my side of it, Wabash has retained its essential core, a small, rigorous, liberal arts college that prepares men to enter whatever world awaits them, often to help better that world. This essential mission abides. Today's language is Wabash College educates men to think critically, act responsibly, lead effectively, and live humanely. That's the language of this century. Those phrases are not that old in the life of the campus, but the essential educational mission abides. When I first came to Wabash as a callow 17-year-old, the college's president was Byron K. Trippett. That's him right up there on the upper level, 1, 2, 3 back. A handsome man. He was the 9th president of the college and the second and final alumnus to sit behind the president's desk. The first was George McIntosh, and his portrait is the last one on this side, who was president from 1906 to 1926. Trippett was president from 56 to 65. He resigned in the early summer after my freshman year. Trippett was then, and remains even today, a Wabash icon, Rhodes Scholar, Dean of the college, President. He helped lead Wabash into the modern era after World War II. Years later, Trippett dictated memories of his 4 decades around the college, his opinions, and his memories of Wabash's presidents, trustees, faculty, and students. And included in that, a lot about his own time as president, his thoughts about the college. His dictated words became a book. The title of that book is Wabash on My Mind. Some of you know it. Trippett recalled in the book that in a homecoming chapel address, he had asserted, quote, the poetic quality of Wabash history. That's a nice phrase, the poetic quality of Wabash history. He remembered that, quote, in substance, his talk included this thought. This is from Wabash on My Mind. The poetry in the life of Wabash lies in its history. It lies in the almost miraculous fact that for a long time here, on these familiar grounds, students and teachers, as real as ourselves, worked and studied, argued and laughed, and worshiped together. Now they are gone, as surely as we shall shortly be gone. But if you listen, you can hear their songs and their cheers. The past is always here, Trippett says. It's influencing us. The present is important, of course. We live in it. But the present is momentary. Wabash's quality is rooted in its history. And it's anticipated in its future if the college will continue to adjust within its important principles. There have been times when I have disagreed with Wabash, when I have been at odds with what I saw happening here. Families disagree. Siblings disagree. Husbands and wives disagree. And they find a way to live together. And by the way, most of the things I disagreed with were either in the long term frivolous, and most of them were, I have to admit the college was right and I was wrong. So I invite you, all of you, seniors particularly, some night before you leave, stand on the mall. Hear the songs and the cheers that Trippett insists are out there. You will hear them, and I hope you will appreciate them. And someday, I hope you will return to appreciate and hear them again. Thank you.
Thank you. This weekend is Honor Scholarship Weekend, as you know, so be on the lookout for all the incoming freshmen and treat them well. Also this weekend, tennis will be at home on Saturday against both Ohio Wesleyan and Hanover. Track will also be at home on Saturday, hosting the J-Own Huntsman Relays. Please rise and sing Old Wabash.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
That was
Thanks.
great.
Good to meet you.
Yeah,
Good
nice
luck
to
with
meet you,
Procter & Gamble.
Oh, well, thank you